Hi, welcome to VNN, the Voice News Network. Today we will discuss about this Citizenship Amendment Act, which has been passed by the Indian Parliament in the face of severe opposition from several quarters of the Indian population. And there have been ripples in various countries too, where groups inimical to India have proposed legislation, have proposed resolutions. Some of them have been passed in cities like Seattle and other places. We have with us today Dr. Azad Kaushik, President of the National Alliance of Indo-Canadians, and he's a community activist as well. He has just returned from India, and where he has met several people. And today we'll discuss about what's happening in India, about the CAA, the protests there, and its repercussions in Canada too among the community. Welcome to VNN, Dr. Kaushik.
Thank you, Bala. It's always a pleasure to
Now,
see you.
what is the CAA? That we have been discussing this, but I think people don't seem to understand. Is it something of general interest to the population? Will it affect certain parts of the certain population segments in India?
Well, Bala, you see, if you really ask my honest opinion about that, it's beyond my comprehension because it lacks logic or any kind of rationale for kind of things that we are hearing in the press and in the community, what I saw in India and over here as well. Basically, it's a very, very humanitarian kind of act that any country would do, including Canada, in a given situation like this. What has happened in India is that, you see, there's no doubt about this thing that, when India got freedom, you see that some countries were created that were purely Islamic countries. I mean, the very foundation of those countries was Islamic. Whereas the Hindu majority India went for a more liberal kind of society, our liberal values as we have in the western part of the world. And so basically by nature, if you look through the history of the Indian civilization, this has been a very free thinking and a liberal society where intellectual order mattered. So they had a very liberal approach. But what has happened is that you see, unfortunately, in neighboring countries based on Islamic foundations or ideas. So what has happened is the minorities in those countries, they have been kind of persecuted. And lots of these people have moved to India. Now, they are persona non grata in India. They have no facilities, they have no rights, and so on. So all this government has done is a very humanitarian kind of thing to allow those persecuted minorities who came from these Islamic countries that originated from India or Indian subcontinent as such, to allow them to live legally in India. And these are the people who came before 2014. So they are in India, but they have no protection from the government or as such to be able to live in a country. So now actually this is an opportunity for these people to live like any other citizens. That it does not take anybody's citizenship away. So it is surprising what kind of this hoopla all about.
Why does the opposition parties in India say, okay, now Muslims from Pakistan and Bangladesh have been excluded from the purview of this act? Are there that many Pakistani and Bangladeshi Muslims in India?
Well, there is no doubt about that. Those have been the poorest borders across Bangladesh and Pakistan, and people have moved into India. There's no doubt about that. That's a serious issue. More recently, we had Rohingyas moving into India also. But you see, Bala, what bothers people like us is that you have a democratically elected government that has enacted a law that is of humanitarian nature that any civilized country would do. The question, what should worry us, all of us, in all the democratic countries is that if you can't achieve power through democratic means, you find ways to create anarchy and violence on the
Right.
streets. That hurts economy, that hurts people's lives, and so on. And this is a very scary scenario, and that should be of concern to all of us, not just for India, for all the democracies around the world.
But there's some Western interests backing these protests. I mean, in India, we find these sort of the Shaheen Bagh in New Delhi, for example. There are women and children sitting there in protest, and half of them don't know what's happening. I mean, so who's funding them? Is there an organization or something that's behind these protests?
Well, there is no doubt about it. There has to be some organization. And when I was in India, I was told it's ladies sitting there with children on the road and affecting traffic movement, hurting thousands and thousands of people who can't move around from work to home. The trouble is, what I learned from India, what people told me, that these people are being paid money. I mean, each person who is unemployed gets 500 rupees a day to just sit over there.
It's like the stone throwers of Kashmir.
Exactly.
Before the Article 370, yeah.
It's on those similar kind of lines. The question is from where all this money is flowing through. The repercussions that we are seeing for this within the political circles in India, and you mentioned about the more civilized Western part of the world. So there are two issues. First, I'll focus on India, and then I come to the Western world. The trouble with India is, and I have to say it honestly, the CAA has become an issue out of nothing. It is not an issue. It should not be an issue anywhere in the world. Now, the question is that probably what I feel is that too many things happened in India at the same time. Well, you know that Article 370 in Kashmir,
Ayodhya verdict,
the Ayodhya verdict also came out at the same time. And then they came down with this law, which is a very reasonable law. What happened is that society, as I could see in India, it doesn't work by logic or rationale. What is happening there is creating a false narrative, a kind of false perception. And in part, I would say that Indian government should have made more efforts to educate people about this law.
Before passing the law.
Before passing the law, yes. And so what has happened is that the space the people got through various opposition parties, through various religious groups, social groups, what happened is they could misinform people that your citizenship would be taken away. I mean, it has nothing to do about taking anybody's citizenship. It's about giving citizenship to the deprived. So that kind of false narrative has percolated down and has led to this kind of situation. That is what I would say about India. Now, having about the Western part of the world.
Yeah, because the European Parliament, a resolution was tabled against the CAA, but of course now they have put it on hold for the time being until I think the end of March for discussion.
Yes, and I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah. But why? What is there? Who is somebody's introducing legislation there, isn't it? These sort of resolutions. What's behind that now?
You know, I mean, you raise a very interesting point. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in North America.
Yeah.
This is what worries me about democracy. You see, democracy is about responsibility. It is not about that you take a non-issue or create a mountain out of a molehill, out of nothing and nowhere. And you know what worries me, this would apply to the entire world, North America, Europe, India, and elsewhere. It's a fundamental flaw here in thinking. And this has to do with human thinking. There's a fallacy of generalization. What is happening in the Western part of the world, they are being misinformed, they are being misled, they are not looking at the facts. And in that process, they are creating a false narrative and perception. Even the city councils in Seattle, they're talking and discussing CAA. I mean, what a city council in Seattle has to do with a country far away in India. And I think this is a danger for our democratic principles. It's an onslaught on democracy. I mean, we do have the right to express, we do have the right to dissent, we do have right to express our opinion freely, there's no doubt about it. But if any kind of democratic decision by a city council to the European Parliament or anywhere else in the world, it should be based on facts, rationale, and logic, and that's what is missing here.
I understand that I heard that there's a petition being circulated in the House of Commons now, or for a resolution against the CAA from Canada.
Well, here in Canada, we are also not immune to these kind of situations, and you rightly said about this petition in the House of Commons that has been signed. I understand about over 1,800 people now, and you know, this is what worries me about here. And I heard some comments decrying CAA and protests happening in Toronto and so on. And this should be a concern for all of us, how such a situation can arise out of nowhere, making an issue out of non-issue.
Why what is happening in India should concern these protesters who are mainly from Pakistan or from even Indians? How does it concern? If they're Canadian citizens, they should be more worried about what's happening in Canada, isn't it?
Well, that's why I use the word fallacy of generalization. As our democracy is mature, I mean, I can understand these kind of situations happening in immature democracies or developing democracies and so on. I can understand it even in India. I mean, if you really look, even in India, the majority is for the Citizenship Amendment Act. It is only a small proportion. And again, it's a generalization that as if they represent the entire India. This is not the voice of India, I would say, and this is not the voice of the world. I mean, we in the Western world here would do that, this kind of act. And in Canada, we are again susceptible to this, because if we are misinformed and misled, so we are moving away from responsible and mature democracy, and that's what we should be concerned about.
So what do we do to what is going to be done to sort of confront this issue here?
Well, I am pretty sure about one thing, that petitions and protests are not a solution to these kind of situations. The best is to get the facts right. And one thing that, and through media, in fact, you could bring these facts to the attention of the community, the Canadian community. I am pretty sure that not a single Canadian would raise a concern about it once they know about it.
Yeah.
The trouble is they don't really know about this, and that should be our concern.
Another thing is these resolutions passed by either European Parliament or any Western powers will have no effect on India. India has categorically said that this CAA Act will not be repealed. So,
well, yes, but the point is this, I mean, we really don't have any logic or rationale. There's no rationale behind this. This is more of a popular rhetoric used by those politicians in India who couldn't get into power through the ballot, basically. So now they really are out of job. So this is their way of surviving through this time period, and somehow find political space somehow to continue in India. But having said that, they're doing a great damage, not just to India, but to the entire democratic principles.
Itself,
yes, and that should be worry for all of us. And if something like European Parliament passes this kind of, without knowing the facts, that should worry us all here in Canada and United States. From City Council to European Parliament, I mean, we should be concerned. But what I would say is that as Canadians, we really need to look at the facts and recognize those facts, and we do have a right to dissent. If we see if there's anything wrong in that act, we should have it corrected. But I really, personally, offering my opinion, I have read all these documents, given this big kind of hoopla happening all over the world, in India, in sections and part of India. So I have looked at those facts. There's nothing unusual about it. It's actually a continuation from the time when Pakistan was created out of India. there was a kind of liaquat pact that was
about taking care of minorities.
Minorities. It's a very humanitarian thought, and there is no reason to be concerned about it. We should wholeheartedly support it.
This Canadian petition mentions the National Register of Citizens, the National Population Register, both of which have not been notified or made official in India yet. Doesn't exist.
Well, I think that's a very important point again, and I think that what has happened is people have mixed up things.
Yeah.
And in part, I think it could be avoided even in India, I would say. I mean, the NCR kind of thing, National Register for Citizens, is specific to Assam. So they took that situation, and that's a decision of the Supreme Court of India. They took that National Citizens Register from there. Then the government wants to know the population. Yes, there's a population explosion in India that nobody is talking about. Population in India is out of control. So they really want to have some idea about the population so that they can develop plans and policies to help the population. So, but the people got mixed up with these kind of things, and they could be avoided by proper education or through media.
Is your National Alliance for Indo-Canadians going to do something about this?
Well, let me say it this way. The National Alliance of Indo-Canadians is a think tank. Okay. Our job is that we Canadians are not misled on issues like this. We would like to bring the facts, and National Alliance of Indo-Canadians would be very happy to share those facts if anybody is interested in knowing about those kind of things. So we essentially would continue to protect Canada, strengthen Canada, and strengthen our community and democracy here.
Yeah, that was quite an interesting discussion. Anyway, thanks a lot, Dr. Kaushik.
Thank you.
Anyway, we have heard some observations by Dr. Azad Kaushik, the president of the National Alliance of Indo-Canadians, about the Citizenship Amendment Act, which is creating a little controversy in India and abroad. Anyway, thanks a lot again, Dr. Kaushik.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice talking to you.